Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. Come in, if anybody's there to come in. Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktavinda. So, we are going to talk. We're going to talk about attachment to devotees. We've been talking about love, and so then I thought, why don't we talk about love devotees have for one another? So, Sita Leela was asking about love and affection, and I wasn't exactly sure what she was asking, but I thought the topic of love and attachment between devotees is interesting. I will talk about that. I have this dramatic effect because the windows are there, so I'm getting this half light here. I'm thinking of turning a little bit. I have a computer here. I'll get more even light, so I don't look like a monster or anything. Maybe I still look like a monster. Anyway, I did some. Welcome everyone. We're in Bhaktivedanta Manor. It's a beautiful, rainy, cloudy day. But the weather has been good before this. I did a workshop on vows, about an hour outside of London. And yesterday we did Sunday feast. This morning we did class. And we're staying in the Life membership quarters. And it's quite nice. You want to see what it looks like? We've got 2 beds. We have a desk. We have 2 beds. And we have big windows. I don't know if you can see. I go outside. Can you see? Yeah. And I'm sitting on the couch. Quite a big room. So, yeah. So there are several verses in the Bhagavatam that talk about attachment to devotees. And, the word attachment is used often in relation to something negative. And so I wanted to read the verses in which we can clarify when it's negative and when it's positive. In the first verse, if you want to look it up, it's from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, 25th chapter, text 20. And this is Lord Kapila, who was the son of Devahuti, and Devahuti is the wife of Kardama Muni. And he's speaking to her, he's preaching to her. So, this is a verse which, it's a lovely verse actually about attachment to devotees and how beneficial it is. And I'll read the Sanskrit, because Sanskrit is nice to read, nice to hear. Prasangam, which means attachment. Prasangam ajaram pasham atmana kavayo vidu saeva sadushu krito moksha dwaram apavritam. Come? Yes? I don't know if they're knocking. There's a room next to me, and when they open their door, it sounds like someone's knocking. Let's read the word meanings. We'll give you a sense. Prasangam, attachment. Ajaram, strong. Pasham, entanglement. Atmana, of the soul. Kabayo, learned men, vidu, know. Sa eva, that same. Sadushu, to the devotees. Krita, applied. Moksha dwaram, the door of liberation. Apavritam, is opened. So what this verse is saying is every learned man knows very well that attachment for the material is the greatest entanglement of the spirit soul. But that same attachment, when applied to the self-realized devotees, opens the door of liberation. Let me read that again. So the first half of the verse is usually what we hear. when we talk about attachment to another person or attachment to anything, but that also includes people. Every learned man knows very well that attachment for the material is the greatest entanglement of the spirit soul, but that same attachment, when applied to the self-realized devotees, opens the door of liberation. So, in other words, this verse is juxtaposing material attachment against attachment to the devotees, because sometimes devotees think, if I'm attached, even if it's to a devotee, that's not good. And we're going to discuss the possibilities of when it's not good. But this verse is specifically saying that if you're attached to a devotee, it's good. Because by becoming attached to a devotee, the verse ends by saying moksha dvaram, apavritam, and moksha means liberation. Dwaram means the gate or the door, and apavritam means open. So attachment to devotees is what actually helps you in Krishna consciousness. And then, of course, the question will be, what does attachment to a devotee mean, and when can that attachment be detrimental? So we'll discuss that today. And we'll discuss it by reading this verse, and there are several other verses I want to read. We'll see how far we get. So we'll read the purport. Again, this is Srimad Bhagavatam 3:25-20, if you have it on your phone or you have it anywhere. You can read along. I'm going to put the chat on. Okay. All right. Here it is clearly stated that attachment for one thing is the cause of bondage in conditioned life, and the same attachment, when applied to something else, opens the door of liberation. Attachment cannot be killed. It has simply to be transferred. So, first point we already made, attachment to something material can be the cause of entanglement in the material world, and attachment, when applied to something transcendental, can be the cause of liberation. So, first point is, attachment is not bad, it's how it's applied. Second point Prabhupada's making is, attachment cannot be killed, it has to be transferred. So, we're going to be attached to something. But what we're attached to is going to determine where we go in life and the level of our consciousness. Attachment for material things is called material consciousness, and attachment for Krishna or his devotee is called Krishna consciousness. So note, here Prabhupada says attachment to the devotee. So attachment to the devotee is good. Consciousness, therefore, is the platform of attachment. It is clearly stated here that when we simply purify the consciousness from material consciousness to Krishna consciousness, we attain liberation. Despite the statement that one should give up attachment, desirelessness is not possible for a living entity. A living entity by constitution has the propensity to be attached to something. We see that if someone has no object of attachment, if he has no children, then he transfers his attachment to cats and dogs. This indicates that the propensity for attachment cannot be stopped. It must be utilized for the best purpose. Our attachment for material things perpetuates our conditioned state, but the same attachment, when transferred to the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his devotee, is the source of liberation. Here it is recommended that attachment should be transferred to the self-realized devotees, the sadhus. And who is a sadhu? Sadhu is not just an ordinary man with a saffron robe or long beard. A sadhu is described in Bhagavad Gita as one who unflinchingly engages in devotional service. Okay, so the purport goes on to talk about sadhus. And then, I'll skip a little bit. It is recommended here that if one at all wants to realize Brahman or spiritual perfection, his attachment should be transferred to the sadhu or devotee. Lord Chaitanya also confirms this, lava matra sadhu sangha sarva siddhi hoy. Simply by a moment's association with the sadhu, one can attain perfection. Mahatma is a synonym of sadhu. It is said that service to a Mahatma or elevated devotee of the Lord is Dwaram Ahur Vimukte, the royal road of liberation. Now, Prabhupada's quoting a verse here. He says, the verse is Bhagavatam, 5th canto, Mahat Sevam, you should serve the Mahatmas. Mahat Sevam Dwaram. Again, the word Dwaram is used. Dwar means gate. It was used in this verse, and we know a place in India called Haridwar, which is the gate to Hari, the door or the gate. Mahat Sevam Dwaram Ahur Vimuktes. It is said that if you serve Mahatmas, then the path to liberation opens. So, we were giving class this morning. I don't know if you were listening to class. Class was at about 7:30. Now it's 11:30. So class was 4 hours ago. So Wednesday morning, Wednesday, if you're free at 4, I guess around 4:30, you can figure it out. 7:30 here in London. I think it's 4:30 in Australia. You could attend class. But anyway, in class this morning, I was making the point that Prabhupada said, when you serve the spiritual master, that's how you get his mercy. So, Krishna's always not only the spiritual master, but Krishna's pleased when you serve the devotees. And by serving the devotees, you get their mercy. I have a Facebook message I'm trying to... Yeah, okay. So, Prabhupada said, one of the things that happens when you serve the devotees, you become injected with good qualities. They develop in you. You get the good quality serum injected in you, and good qualities start to develop as a result of serving the devotees. Now, Prabhupada also mentioned in the Bhagavatam another interesting phenomenon. It's a similar point. He said, what happens when you serve somebody is you develop the qualities of the person you're serving. It's kind of a transcendental mystical process. So you serve the Vaishnavas, you serve the spiritual master, and you develop the qualities of the person you're serving. So naturally, you're not going to serve someone if you're not attached to them, if you don't want to be around them, don't want to be with them, you don't like them. So that means attachment to the devotee is very good, because when you're in the Sangha of devotees, you'll serve, and by serving you'll benefit by imbibing their good qualities, and also by being with them, you'll become attached to Krishna. So that's the idea that this verse is saying, that attachment to devotees is very good. And we're going to discuss where the attachment could be bad. But for this first part of the discussion, we want to just make this point very clear. To be attached to devotees is very good. Now, it's why we become devotees is because of the devotees. And any time someone's coming to Krishna consciousness and they like the devotees, we always think, this is good, they like the devotees. Because they like the devotees, they'll want to spend time with the devotees. And if they spend time with the devotees, they're going to become Krishna conscious. So we recognize that with someone's coming to Krishna consciousness. And we want to make relationships with them because we know if they like us, if they become attached to us, it's good. Because if they like us, they'll also want to be with us, they'll want to listen to what we have to say, they'll be more willing to engage in devotional service. So that's obvious. It's very good if you like a devotee. And that this verse that is being quoted here is that's how you become Krishna conscious, through serving the devotees. Mahat Sevam Dwaram Ahur Vimuktes. The path to liberation, the gates to heaven, the spiritual world, not heaven, the spiritual world, the gates to the spiritual world are opened by serving the great devotees. Now Prabhupada goes on to say, rendering service to the materialist has the opposite effect. If anyone offers service to a gross materialist or a person engaged only in sense enjoyment, then by association with such a person, the door to hell is open. So, imbibing the qualities of the person we associate with and serve. So it works going up, it works going down. Attachment to a devotee is attachment to the service of the Lord. Because if one associates with the sadhu, the result will be that the sadhu will teach him how to become a devotee, a worshipper, and a sincere servitor of the Lord. So let me read that again. Attachment to a devotee is attachment to the service of the Lord. So then there's no question about the benefit of being attached to a devotee. Because when you're attached to the devotee will engage you in service. These are the gifts of a sadhu. So the gifts, what? Become a devotee, a worshipper, and a sincere servant of the Lord. If we want to associate with a sadhu, we cannot expect him to give us instructions on how to improve our material condition. But he will give us instructions on how to cut the knot of the contamination of material attraction and how to elevate ourselves in devotional service. That is the result of associating with a sadhu. Kapila Muni first of all instructs that the path of liberation begins with such association. So his whole purport is basically dedicated to those 2 points. Attachment to devotee is very good. It opens the path to liberation. Attachment to a materialistic person then will make you materialistic. So that naturally the question comes up, and often in Grihastha life, because we hear so much in Bhagavatam and in classes in general about not being attached to family. It's also there in Bhagavad Gita. So now we're talking about being attached to devotee, and you can say, okay, I understand that being attached to my spiritual master is good. I understand that being attached to advanced devotees is good. But what about being attached to my husband? Or what about being attached to my wife? We generally hear that that kind of attachment is the attachment that will cause us to go down. There's a nice story. I think I may have told you this story before. And one sannyasi was asking Prabhupada, is attachment to women the cause of bondage? Or the main cause of bondage? Or the cause of bondage? And Prabhupada said yes. They were on a morning walk when he said it, and then they came back to the temple, and 4 of Prabhupada's female disciples greeted him and paid obeisances when Prabhupada came in. And Prabhupada said, but if you associate with these women, then you'll be liberated. So if I say, well, is it association with my wife, is it bad? Well, what do you do when you associate? Because even if you associate with a pure devotee, if your motive is material, to get something material, then that association is not necessarily going to benefit you. So when we talk about association with pure devotees, what we're reading is that you're associating properly. They're engaging you in service. So if the attachment to wife or husband is on the platform of Krishna consciousness, then we find that that attachment actually helps us. It's not a form of entanglement. So that leads us into the next. I hope you don't mind I'm reading so much. I know sometimes when we read, we can't concentrate, but maybe I can read in a way to capture your attention. This is a prayer from Queen Kunti, and this is the prayer that I sang on my album, As the Ganges forever flows unto the sea, may my attraction be drawn to you, and not drawn to anyone else. Well, here's the full verse. I'll read the Sanskrit. This is Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st Canto, Chapter 8, Text 41. Tvai me nanya vishaya matir madhupate sukrit ratim udvahatam adha gange hogam hudandati. O Lord of Madhu, as the Ganges forever flows to the sea without hindrance, let my attraction be constantly drawn unto you, without being diverted to anyone else. So now the connotation here is that Queen Kunti is saying, I want to be attracted to you and nobody else. And her sons are all devotees. So then you would question, well, why wouldn't she want to be attached to her sons because they're devotees? Wouldn't you find it advantageous to be in the association of such great souls as Yudhisthira Maharaj and Arjuna and Bhima, Nakul and Sahadev? Yes. So it's interesting that she's praying not to be diverted by attraction to anything. And there's another prayer, which if we have time we'll read, where she actually asks Krishna to sever her attachment to her family. So we have to discuss this so we can get a clear understanding of where attachment is healthy and where it's unhealthy. So in relation to family, the demarcation is different, because in the first verse it was clearly, here's a devotee, be attached. Here's a non-devotee, don't be attached. But now we're talking about the possibility of attachment to a devotee not being healthy or being detrimental. At least in theory, that's the discussion we're going to have, or that's the premise in theory. Purport: perfection of pure devotional service is attained when all attention is diverted towards the transcendental loving service of the Lord. To cut off the tie of all other affection does not mean complete negation of the finer elements, like affection for someone else. Again, in Prabhupada, he's saying the same thing he said in the previous purport. This is not possible. A living being, whoever he may be, must have feeling of affection for others, because this is a symptom of life. The symptoms of life, such as desire, anger, hankerings, feelings of attraction, etc., cannot be annihilated. Only the objective has to be changed. Desire cannot be negated, but in devotional service, the desire is changed only for the service of the Lord in place of desire for sense gratification. The so-called affection for family, society, country, etc. consists of different phases of sense gratification. When this desire is changed for the satisfaction of the Lord, it is called devotional service. So, let's kind of skip ahead to what Prabhupada's going to explain, and I'll explain it first. Basically, what Prabhupada's saying here is, what is your aim of your attraction? Why are you attracted? What is attracting you? Is the attraction in relation to devotional service or is the attraction in relation to enjoying? For example, we find examples in Bhagavatam of women who are very attached to their husbands, and they're always glorified as being chaste wives. That being attached to the husband is the highest dharma of the woman. Of course, you could say in devotional service, that's not the highest dharma. The highest dharma is to be Krishna conscious, be attached to Krishna, be attached to devotional service, be attached to the spiritual master. But still, the principle is, if the husband is Krishna conscious, then that is a dharma for the wife, and it would be wrong not to be attached. And we think, okay, I should be detached. Is it wrong to be attached to my husband? No. If your husband's a devotee, especially if he's a good devotee, then by that attachment, you become Krishna conscious. Or vice versa. If your wife is a good devotee, by that attachment, you become Krishna conscious. What that means is, the result of that attachment is Krishna consciousness. So that answers the question, how do you know if attachment is healthy or not? But what's the result of the attachment? Is it making you Krishna conscious or not? And one devotee, I remember a Bhagavatam class she gave, and she said, I learned so much in Krishna consciousness from my children. So much I learned from them, raising them. So you might say raising children is an entanglement. You might say attachment to children brings you down, etc. But these children are devotees. And she learned so much, and she had so many good experiences. So therefore, her raising of children, her attachment to her children was enhancing her devotional service. So there may be a point in one's life when that attachment becomes detrimental. Perhaps like Prabhupada's example that he gives, that he was meant to leave home and spread Krishna consciousness and give that situation up. So at that point, that attachment then became an impediment. So most people are not in that situation, or most people will not be in that situation till later in life. If, let's say, one is an empowered preacher, and later in life it would be best for one to leave home, and that would be the best service to the world, to give that affection that he has for wife and children, give it to the world. Then you could say at that point, attachment to wife and children now has become detrimental relatively. It'd be, in a sense, not detrimental to his own Krishna consciousness, but in that sense, detrimental to his service of what he could be doing to the world. And Prabhupada talks about that in the Bhagavatam. That kind of affection or attachment then becomes an impediment to expanding one's devotional service, and then that attachment one has to give up, attachment to the comforts and pleasures of home life. But that's a very specific situation. What Prabhupada's saying here is you can't be desireless and you're not going to be without attachment. So if your attachment is to a devotee and that attachment is helping you in Krishna consciousness, that's very good. And generally we see that most people need to be married, and we also see that when they're not attached, it actually it's more problematic for their Krishna consciousness, because when they're not attached, it means the relationship isn't good, and when the relationship isn't good, it becomes disturbing to the mind and unsettling, and when one is unsettled, it becomes more difficult to engage in devotional service and do sadhana peacefully. So when the relationship is good, they can do their sadhana nicely and they can do their service together, and for the relationship to be good, generally, it's because there's some attachment for one another. So in that sense, that attachment is good. So you have to evaluate. Now, on this basis, now then you could say, well, what if my husband's a good devotee, my wife's a good devotee? Is there any point now, before I come to this point of where leaving would be preferred, or what should be done at a certain point in life, and remaining at home would be detrimental? Not considering that, just considering before that, is there any point where that attachment becomes degraded, where it's wrong? Well, I think we should define attachment in Krishna consciousness as attachment to Krishna service. So as soon as that attachment comes to enjoying that other person, then yes, that's detrimental. Then it becomes material attachment, and then that gets in the way of your devotional service. So I have my wife, my husband, and children, and I want them to serve me, I want to enjoy them, I want to be the center of the family. Yes, that kind of attachment, that will be problematic for your devotional service. So let's read on. I think Prabhupada's going to explain this. In the Bhagavad Gita, we can see that it was just to satisfy his own personal desires that Arjuna refused to fight with his brothers and relations. But when he heard the message of the Lord, Srimad Bhagavad Gita, he changed his decision. He changed his decision and served the Lord. And for his doing so, he became a famous devotee of the Lord. For it is declared in all the scriptures that Arjuna attained spiritual perfection by devotional service to the Lord in friendship. The Prabhupada goes on to say that Kunti wanted to be in the same way, just fixed in her devotional service. So let's read on, because now it talks about her affection for the Pandavas, and that relates to what we were just speaking about. Her affection for the Pandavas and the Vrishnis is not out of the range of devotional service, because the service of the Lord and the service of the devotees are identical. Sometimes service to the devotee is more valuable than service to the Lord. Interesting. But here, so Kunti's sons are devotees, and devotional service to the devotee is sometimes more pleasing to Krishna than direct service to him. Glorification of the devotee is sometimes considered more purifying than glorifying Krishna directly. So Prabhupada makes that point. So it said, her sons are devotees, and service to her sons is considered a very high service, even higher than serving Krishna. Can be considered better. But here the affection of Kunti Devi for the Pandavas and the Vrishnis was due to family relation. So what Prabhupada's point he's making is that what Kunti Devi is feeling is that my affection is on the bodily platform. It's not a genuine spiritual platform. Just like you have your spiritual master, and so you have affection, but your spiritual master is not a bodily relationship. So generally the affection for your spiritual master or other senior devotees, because it's not on a body relationship, it's more pure. Now you might see your spiritual master as like your father, but it's your spiritual father. And so there's natural attachment for the spiritual master, or the spiritual master naturally has attachment for his disciples. He sees them like children. But there's a specific attachment when there's a body relationship. And so now Kunti is feeling that kind of attachment, that aspect of the relationship with her sons to be detrimental. And that's what she's praying to Krishna to be able to sever herself from that attachment. So that's a point Prabhupada's making. Here the affection of Kunti Devi for the Pandavas and the Vrishnis was due to family relation. The tie of affection in terms of material relation is the relation of Maya, because the relations of the body or the mind are due to the influence of external energy. Relations of the soul established in relation with the Supreme Soul are factual relations. When Kunti Devi wanted to cut off the family relation, she meant to cut off the relation of the skin. The skin relation is the cause of material bondage. But the relation of the soul is the cause of freedom. This relation of the soul to the soul can be established by the via medium of the relation with the supersoul. Seeing in the darkness is not seeing, but seeing by the light of the sun means to see the sun and everything else which was unseen in the darkness. That is the way of devotional service. So it's clear here, the point that Prabhupada's making. It's the same point I was making. When you talk about bodily relationship, you're talking about material consciousness. We have children in the material world, in material consciousness. We get married and have children because we want to enjoy these things. In Krishna consciousness, we're supposed to get married and have children in order to advance spiritually, in order to help the children become Krishna conscious. So whenever that's not there, and the desire again to become attached on the level of enjoyment, then that attachment we want to sever, we want to clear that out. And when that's not there, then you can have this pure relationship, pure attachment. So I'm going to continue reading. If you have any questions, just ask them anytime you want. And the next verse deals with this specifically. Now this is quite a well-known verse. I don't know if you know it, but here Kunti Devi is praying to be detached from her family. Ata vishvesha vishvatman vishwamurte sukeshu me sneha pasham imam chinhi dridham pandushu vrishnishu. It's kind of a heavy prayer. O Lord of the universe, soul of the universe, O personality of the form of the universe, please therefore sever my tie of affection for my kinsmen, the Pandavas and the Vrishnis. So I'll read the purport in this. Elaborates on what we've been talking, and then we can have some questions. Just take your questions. A pure devotee of the Lord is ashamed to ask anything in self-interest from the Lord. But the householders are sometimes obliged to ask favors from the Lord, being bound by the tie of family affection. Srimati Kunti Devi was conscious of this fact, and therefore she prayed to the Lord to cut off the affectionate tie from her own kinsmen, the Pandavas and the Vrishnis. The Pandavas are her own sons, and the Vrishnis are the members of her parental family. Krishna was equally related to both the families. Both the families required the Lord's help, and because both were dependent devotees of the Lord, Srimati Kunti Devi wished Sri Krishna to remain with her sons, the Pandavas. But by his doing so, her paternal house would be bereft of the benefit. All these partialities troubled the mind of Kunti, and therefore she desired to cut off affection. In other words, if Krishna stayed with one aspect of her family, that one side of her family, Krishna wouldn't be with the other side, and she's attached to both sides, and this whole scenario just makes her think, like, I wish I had no attachment. You know, sometimes we have duties to our family, but sometimes it comes to a point where the attachment becomes detrimental because there's problems which we can't resolve in the family. So it's something like that, where she's saying, if I just had no attachment to the family at all, then I wouldn't have this problem. It wouldn't bother me that Krishna's with one side of the family and not with the other side of the family. So that's an interesting example, isn't it? Where even though it's a family of devotees, still circumstantially it's creating a problem for her. And she feels if she had no attachment, that problem wouldn't be there, and therefore she's praying, please sever my tie of attachment. Did you get that? I think that's relatable a lot of times. And I mean, you may not know because if you weren't born in a family of devotees, you wouldn't know this. But sometimes even in a family of devotees, or you marry into a family, your brothers and sisters marry in, sometimes the complications are such that if you were a little more detached, you would just not get so involved in trying to sort things out that maybe can never really be properly sorted out anyway. The Sita Lila is saying, how is it possible to not be attached to children on the bodily platform? Well, Prabhupada was asked once, because in the Gita he said we shouldn't be attached to children, and that was misunderstood, because if you're not attached to children, you don't take care of them, and that's your duty as a parent, obviously, to give them shelter, guidance, take care of them physically, in every other way. They're dependent on you, so that's your duty. It's everyone's duty. So Prabhupada didn't mean it that way. He meant don't become so attached that it interferes with your Krishna consciousness. To become so attached that maybe to satisfy your child, you would just stop, you would give up your 2 hours of japa to do something for them, and that would be an example of that. Another example Prabhupada gives is that if you're attached to your children in the spiritual way, then facilitate their advancement in Krishna consciousness, and that's the right attachment. So we say, how can we not be attached to children? If you're really attached and you really love them, make them Krishna conscious. So you show your attachment in that way. I love my son, I love my daughter, and I want to manifest that love and that attachment by facilitating their Krishna consciousness. And if that love manifests as spoiling them, then that's material attachment, right? For example, the Gurukul system is that a boy, not a girl, but a boy at the age of 5 would live with the spiritual master. I mean, women occasionally would, but generally it's for boys. So the boy would live with the spiritual master. And you might question why at such an early age. Because at the age of 5, that's the point when the boy is supposed to be disciplined. And Chanakya Pandit says before that, you don't try to discipline. You just satisfy the child whatever they want. You give them, and at the age of 5, then you try to discipline them. That's when it begins. So at the age of 5, they can be disciplined. And the worst person to discipline the child are the parents, for 2 reasons. One, the child, if the child's disciplined in the Gurukul by the spiritual master or the assistance of the spiritual master, he'll listen. The parent, he's less likely to listen. Another aspect is most parents are less likely to discipline their children to the level that the spiritual master would discipline them in the Gurukula. Because it's your kid and you're too attached and you don't want him to get up at 4 o'clock. Actually, in the Gurukul, they get up at 2 o'clock. You don't want him to get up at 2 o'clock. You're going to wake your kid up at 2 o'clock and pour a cold bucket of water on him? I don't think you have the heart to do that. In the Gurukula, that's what they do. And the boys readily do it because they can be disciplined, whereas the parents can't. So because of attachment, the parents can't discipline. So that's where the attachment gets in the way. But because the parents are attached to seeing the kid be Krishna conscious, they want to do what's best for their Krishna consciousness. Of course, I'm referring to the Gurukul in Mayapur, and we don't have Gurukuls like that around the world. But general point is that you do things which will help your children be Krishna conscious, and that's how you divert your attachment. So the answer to your question is you cannot not be attached, but you can divert it. Right? So, you know, there was a song by Sting, if you really love someone, let them go. So it's something like that. You know, sometimes you may be attached to someone, but the best thing is to let them go, because their life will be better free from your attachment. So that's the idea. You will do things for the child that are best for their spiritual life and not spoil them materially. Spoil them till they're 5. After that, discipline. Is that okay? If it's not, you can ask another question and I'll continue reading this. A pure devotee cuts off the limited ties of affection for his family and widens his activities of devotional service for all forgotten souls. The typical example is the band of 6 Goswamis who followed the path of Lord Chaitanya. All of them belong to the most enlightened and cultured rich families of the higher castes. But for the benefit of the mass of population, they left their comfortable homes and became mendicants. To cut off all family affection means to broaden the field of activities. Without doing this, no one can be qualified as a Brahmin, a king, a public leader, or a devotee of the Lord. The personality of Godhead as an ideal king showed this by his example. Sri Ramachandra cut off the tie of affection for his beloved wife to manifest the qualities of an ideal king. So you know the story that Sita was tested to see that she was chaste. She went in the fire and she came out. That proved her chastity. Lord Ram accepted her back. Now, there's a principle or injunction, I believe it must be in Manu Samhita or some other Dharma Shastra, that if a wife is away from home for one night, then the husband will not or should not accept her back. Because the idea is, if she's gone out of home, that means she's been with another man. At least that's the idea, that she would never stay away from her husband. Of course, our culture is different, but in this traditional culture, the woman would never leave home. So if she stayed at the home of another man, she was considered unchaste. And the husband would not accept her back unless maybe he's henpecked and controlled by her. And in those days, it was very wrong for a man to be henpecked. So, now in Lord Ramachandra's kingdom, one of the things that he did was he would go out incognito and he would mix amongst people And he just wanted to hear what they were talking about to see if anyone was talking about him. And then a man and a woman were having a fight, and apparently this woman had spent the night away from her husband. And he said, I'm not going to take you back. He said, I'm not going to be a henpecked husband like Lord Ram. Now, a king, to establish his power, his position as the wielder of dharma, he has to be dharmic. And so Ramchandra understood, if people are thinking that I accepted back Sita and this is irreligious, it's wrong, I shouldn't have done it, then they will demean my position and I won't be able to execute my service as king properly. So then he told Sita, you have to go. So he had to separate from that attachment, cut it for a higher service. So that's the point that Prabhupada's making, that I was making earlier also, that sometimes for a higher service, at a certain point there's a situation where now that attachment, which was good, becomes detrimental. So this is an example. Sannyas is an example. Prabhupada gives the example of the 6 Goswamis. So they renounced everything. They became sannyasis. Such personalities as a Brahmin, a devotee, a king, or public leader must be very broad-minded in discharging their duties. Kunti Devi was conscious of this fact, and being weak, she prayed to be free from bondage of family affection. So, Nanda Prabhupada says, it's just the last point. The Lord is addressed as the Lord of the universe, or the Lord of the universal mind, indicating his all-powerful ability to cut the hard knot of family affection. Therefore, it is sometimes experienced that the Lord, out of his special affinity toward a weak devotee, breaks the family affection by force of circumstance arranged by his all-powerful energy. By doing so, he causes the devotee to become completely dependent on him and thus clears the path for his going back to Godhead. Now, Prabhupada's talking about himself here. And Prabhupada had 2 dreams in which his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, asked him to leave his family because Prabhupada had a mission. He was the one who was meant to spread Krishna consciousness around the world. Correct? Yeah, we know that now. And so Bhaktisiddhanta knew that long ago. And therefore he came in a dream and said, you need to come out of family life. And Prabhupada said that he didn't feel ready or equipped or didn't realize that this was what he was going to have to do to spread Krishna consciousness. And he said somehow he was reluctant. So we will take it, either that's Prabhupada's Leela or he's saying that humbly or it's actually true. But for the sake of the philosophical discussion, and Prabhupada here in this purport is making this philosophical point by referring to himself. So let's just take it at face value. So Prabhupada is saying that if a devotee is especially meant to do something, Krishna may intervene and just sever that attachment. So that happened. His family life came to kind of a natural closing. He didn't really have to do much. I mean, he was trying to preach Krishna consciousness with them. It wasn't working. So it came to a natural closing. So Prabhupada's making the point that if we're sincere and ever we become attached in a way that may inhibit our devotional service, Krishna will help us. He'll do something. We'll get in a big fight, right, with our husband or wife, and we'll just say, this is just horrible. And we become detached, at least for a few minutes anyway. I don't know if you ever had that experience. And sometimes getting in a big argument or fight is very sobering, because it makes you realize you're not living in paradise. And if you sometimes forget and think you're living in paradise, yeah, you could become attached to a wife, family, home, husband, children, and so many things, attached beyond what is healthy. So every once in a while, maybe Krishna puts a little too much chili in the relationship if he thinks it's necessary. I've seen that in my own family life. Like sometimes it seemed like there were forces beyond our control that just made things go haywire. And it wasn't really any of our doing. And then they just went back to normal. Like, what was that all about? Maybe Krishna was just trying to remind us, oh, you have a good relationship, but things are not perfect. Don't get too attached. Part of the other aspect of attachment is that the attachment to family life brings so much material pleasure that we can forget our spiritual duties. We can even forget we're getting older. We can forget that human life is meant for self-realization. So that's there in the Bhagavatam. I think in this canto, third canto, you find it in fifth canto, I believe also. Maybe more so in the third canto, where it talks about a person who's very attached to family who can't give up his body, or who gives up his body thinking of his family. So, but if you're practicing Krishna consciousness together, it's unlikely at the end of life your consciousness would be fixed solely on your family. It would be fixed on Krishna because your family is helping you become Krishna conscious. Anyway, that's just the idea of don't become too attached. Family is explained in the Bhagavatam because you don't want to become so attached that it becomes the thing you're most attached to, and when you're ready to leave your body, you will think what you're most attached to, and then rather than being Krishna conscious, you'll be family conscious. Of course, you could say, but if they're devotees and I'm thinking of them, isn't that Krishna conscious? And you could say yes, but it's also how are you thinking of them? What is the attachment that you have for them? It's like a spiritual master, when he leaves this world, he's also attached to his disciples. But how is that attachment? What is that? How does it look? That's the question. So that's all I wanted to say. I could say one other thing, but it doesn't relate exactly to this topic. And next week I was thinking the topic would be the love of the disciple for the spiritual master. That whole realm of affection, what does it mean? And then again, as we discussed today, where can that affection turn material, where it actually turns against you? Where it could be a feeling, but that feeling is not applied in action. And it can be what we say sentiment, not genuine. So I think we'll wait till next week to discuss that. So if you have any other questions, or you'd like to make some comment, then I'll take it now, because I think I covered the points I wanted to make. I think it's clear. And I don't know, Sita Leela, if this is when you were asking about love and affection, if this was what you were thinking about. But anyway, it gave me this idea. And I think if we were to kind of bring this all together, we're talking about a balance in which we're attached in a healthy way and not attached in a way that's detrimental. And everything in life requires balance. So as Prabhupada said, to think that we shouldn't be attached or can't be attached, that's wrong. Is attachment to devotees wrong? No, you're going to be attached because devotees are attractive. So to think it's wrong is wrong. To be attached to sense gratification is wrong. And if we're attached to sense gratification in relation to devotees or in relation to anything, yeah, that's wrong. But if we're attached to devotees, that means we inspire one another. We discuss Krishna consciousness together. We do service together. All these things are good. So the attachment is really, really good. So Guru says, what if someone is most attached to their guru? Mean more attached to their guru than their husband, more attached to their guru than their father. It all depends how you process that attachment. Like, when I met Prabhupada, he became my father. I was much more attached to him than my own father. But it didn't mean I neglected my father. It didn't mean I didn't like my father. It just meant that Prabhupada took on the position of a real father, where my father didn't fulfill that role. And I don't think it was unhealthy in my relationship with my father. And I don't think it was unhealthy in my relationship with Prabhupada. I think it was very healthy because Prabhupada was guiding me, and that's what the father should do. So it's not wrong to be more attached to your spiritual master. I think that's normal. But when it becomes abnormal is when it undermines your affection for things you should have affection for friends, husband, wife, children. If you neglect your husband, neglect your wife, neglect your children, neglect so many things in the name of affection for your guru, that would be wrong. If you naturally have it, that can be a great asset in your service. And then you can see your family as a, you could say, an extension of that attachment. Because you're raising your family based on the teachings you get from Prabhupada. And so they're getting the benefit of your attachment. I think most devotees were more attached to Prabhupada than anyone or anything. And in some stages of their Krishna consciousness, it manifests in an unhealthy way. But as it balanced out and matured, then it's okay. Like sometimes a devotee is so attached to their guru that they will mistreat another devotee in order to serve their guru. So then that would be wrong. You understand? So it has to manifest in a healthy way on the ground. And if we're neglectful of others or we mistreat others in the name of service, then that's bad. In the name of devotion to my guru. Yes, in the highest sense, the traditional sense, you say your guru owns everything. So my guru's, he owns the family in a sense. We want to use everything in the service of our guru. This is, in a traditional sense, it's not my house, it's the guru's house. Nothing I have is mine. It all belongs to my guru. Like the brahmachari, he doesn't eat until the guru calls him. Everything is, that's like a very high level. And my only point is you could misunderstand that level and mess up a lot of people's lives in the name of service to your guru. And then the other point Guru Nishna makes is our behavior is a reflection of our guru. Yeah, it's true. So don't do anything your guru wouldn't do in the name of following his instructions. Right? Make sense? Yeah. All right. Anyone have anything else to add to this discussion? Sitalila has a question, but I can't read the whole thing. It ends, the question, I can only see, what if one is attached to devotees, but in the association, Krishna consciousness, and then I can't read the rest, and I kind of think you're saying your Krishna consciousness goes down, and you're attached to them, they're your good friends or whatever, you like them, but when you associate, your Krishna consciousness goes down. Is that what you're saying? That's what I think. Well, I'll answer that question and give you time to finish the question so I can read it. Just type it again after Krishna consciousness. Yeah, Krishna consciousness, yeah, that's what I thought. So it's an interesting question. This one devotee, well, the two devotees joined, they were very good friends. And they joined when I was in charge of temple in Vancouver. And one devotee once came up to me and he said, don't put us together in the same service. He said, because we are such close friends that when we're together, we just joke around. And we're so used to, from our days before we were devotees, we're so used to these frivolous activities, and we can't be together. So there may be some truth to that, that sometimes A devotee may be a very nice devotee, and we may be attached to them, but their intimate association may not be good for us specifically. And therefore, our acharyas say birds of a feather flock together. It's okay to find out that kind of association which is beneficial. And other association which you don't feel is so beneficial, then attachment to those devotees could be problematic, because you want to be with them, but the result of being with them is not, you might have a good time, but you're not very Krishna conscious, so you may prefer not to be with them. And I think that's just the practical reality. And naturally, when you advance in devotional service, you become attracted to talking about Krishna, you become attracted to understanding Krishna consciousness, and naturally then you want to be with people who are also similarly interested, so you can have something to share with them. And if you're with people and you can't share your interest in Krishna consciousness, then in the long run it's going to be hard to cultivate intimate relationships, because that's part of the process of friendship, is discussing, churning the ocean of Krishna consciousness. So that's, as long as we're not unkind, unfriendly, offensive, then it's not a problem. It's just the way it is. And that's just a reality of life. So sometimes you need some entertainment, then you can hang out with the entertaining devotees. Sometimes you need to chill, you can hang out with the chill devotees. But most of the time, you want to hang out with the devotees that are on your frequency. And it's not offensive to avoid association or prolonged association with those who are not on your frequency. It's just, you have to do what's best for your Krishna consciousness, and also what's natural. That's quite natural. And I think any senior devotee will live their life in that way. They'll seek the association where they can churn, relish, discuss Krishna Katha. I do that personally. Sometimes I'll see a devotee and I know if that devotee gets a hold of me, then he's going to chew my ear off for an hour about all the problems in ISKCON or something. So when I see him, I'll think, if I talk to him now, an hour will be gone, and it will not be of much benefit to me or him. So sometimes I'll just take a little step to one side or another to avoid directly running into that devotee. And I think that's okay. I think sometimes you have to do that. Time is valuable, your life is valuable. Is that all right? Is that okay? Okay. So why don't we stop here? We've gone over an hour. We've actually gone 1 hour, 3 minutes, and 33 seconds, to be exact. Okay, so next weekend I'm doing workshops, Saturday and Sunday, and I'm trying to rethink how to schedule everything. Because if we're just doing the weekend schedule, I'm going to be missing it a lot. Or when I am able to do it, I'm often doing it in between programs. So I'll think about that a little, or someone, maybe you can suggest other times that might be more beneficial. Anyway, think about that. Wednesday morning, if you want to attend Bhagavatam class, Bhaktivedanta Manor, it should be televised on their website. If not, Guru Nishta, you can double check and see. Come in. Haribol. You can. Oh. Hold on 1 second. You can double check there, or and then Soho Street will be Thursday morning, and definitely they broadcast, and I'm 99% sure they broadcast here. If you saw the class, then you would know. Hold on 1 second. She's locked out. So, and yeah, so that's what's going on. And then the weekend we're doing a workshop, and I do not like to broadcast workshops because it really, there's so many factors involved, such as phones which are charged in the right place, where internet is connected, and then if we promise you we're going to do it and we go there, the internet is not working, we don't have any internet. I have to be conscious there's an audience out there, and half the time we're doing exercises, which means you're just staring at me doing my email while they're doing their exercise. It's just that it's not right. I don't like it. But if you can't see me on internet, then Guru Nishta will let me know, and then I can bring my phone and we can broadcast live. Okay. All right. So Hare Krishna to all of you, and I just sent some realizations on WhatsApp, and we're actually in the process of designing an app called Mahatma Sangha, in which you'll get a quote every day. Aside from my spontaneous realizations, you get a quote every day, which is kind of meant for the broader base of devotees. So that's good news, isn't it? Okay. Well, it's for Android. If you have an iPhone, you'll have to sell it, or you can send it to me. Okay. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Go Premanand.